Okay. Hello, we are live. This is a special bonus edition of the Black Panther Book Club. Although it's not a book club, it's actually going to be the Black Panther Film Club because Faria and I are going to be talking about, for the first time with each other, our reactions to seeing Black Panther in the movie theaters this weekend. Welcome back from that 1-minute intermission, Faria. Are you ready to talk movie?
Oh my God, I've been bursting with excitement. I watched it on Thursday, and as soon as I got out, I think I messaged you saying that, dude, you gotta see it. We need to talk about this. And, I just wanted to talk to you everything about Black Panther from that moment. And I've been bursting with excitement. So, yeah, I'm so glad you managed to go and see it, like, before this live stream.
I told my wife, I was like, look, we have a kid and we don't have a lot of babysitter type people here in New Zealand with us, but the movie opened all around the globe at the same time, which Marvel movies tend to do, because some movies don't come out here for like months afterwards. And I said to her, I'm like, you cannot make me try to survive on the internet for an entire, over a week, avoiding spoilers. And do you know what? I was not spoiled one bit other than the trailer. I knew nothing. This is full spoilers, so let's just get out of this way. I put it in the title. We're going to spoil everything. Do not watch this if you haven't seen the movie.
Yes, spoilers!
Okay. So, like, for example, when Black Panther suddenly apparently dies in the middle of the movie, I thought that was the end. I thought that was the end of the movie. I'm like, oh, he's going to defeat Killmonger and everybody's going to get happy. I guess this movie was okay. Little did I realize that there was like a whole hour of amazing movie that came after that because I was so spoiler free. And I usually love spoilers. I think it enhances your ability to like digest a work if you kind of already know what's coming and you can like critically interact with it. But I'm so happy I went into this unspoiled. Did you manage to get into it without knowing anything about it?
Oh yeah, because I went for the first show. So I didn't know anything about it. And the thing is, like, so despite me being a geek, my only interaction with the geek world is pretty much through the Omnibus Collectors group. Like those people who are coming new to it, there's a group. That's how Peter and I kind of met each other in air quote and, started chatting. So yeah, my only interest, and no one was there talking about it, and I kind of don't follow or listen to any of this, so anything else. So I pretty much just went into it blind, and it was the first show. And the thing is, like, so I walked there, and this is the kind of like, I don't know how things were in New Zealand. So I live in Baltimore, and I walked into the movie theater thinking that, oh, I'm just gonna buy a ticket and just walk right in. I went there, everything was sold out. Every show was sold out. I managed to finally get into the 9:30 show, and there were already 12 people in line. So yes, and the thing is, like, also what happened, like, my friend actually bought the ticket, but by the time we arrived there, it was on a reserve sitting. So by the time we got there, we arrived there at 5:15, and our show was supposed to start at 7, and we had that first row, like that's where we could sit. And so I told my friend, I'm like, I can't do this. I'm not.
Oh yeah, I've seen a couple of movies from the front row, and that, especially like a movie that has fast moving action, to like be watching it like with your nose pointed up, and it doesn't really work.
Yeah, so we got out and we were like, okay, let's try to kind of exchange the ticket. Everything was sold out until like 8:30 or 9 o'clock show. So, and by the time we got exchanged our ticket and we kind of arrived, there were already 12 people in line waiting to get in. So that was the Black Panther movie experience. And the thing is, obviously, my friend had to leave because, she had a babysitter and everything like that.
So you wound up seeing it by yourself?
No, but I actually kind of started talking to this other lady, and it was very nice because in the end we actually hung out later on as well. So it was like a wholesome experience for me because I made a friend while I went to see Black Panther movie.
Bringing people together. Black Panther.
I know, right? So
I want to jump right in because we've been speculating for 3 weeks now on this book club, this Black Panther book club that we've had. And if you haven't seen it, or you just have to listen because there's not a lot of visual element other than our beautiful faces, is that we've talked about 35 issues of Christopher Priest's run from 1998, which is, now having seen the movie, oh my God, it's so influential of the movie. Like the movie it won't spoil the movie. It doesn't take it beat for beat, but all of the DNA of the movie is in this run. And we've kind of been speculating, like, he fights Killmonger in the book, and we're pretty sure we saw that in the trailer. And the Dora Milaje are introduced in this run. We're like, well, we know there's Dora Milaje in the movie, but things are so different. So I think we should start with the Dora Milaje, because Freya and I have been really struggling with them in the priest run, because in the priest run, there are these child brides who have to marry Black Panther if he shows any kind of affection to them. So they're his like confidants and his defense, but he can't interact with them or touch them at all. And they're cool, but it makes it hard to sympathize with them. And also it's like a little skeevy, because there's these like 17-year-old girls that have been with like arranged marriages, which there's clearly a cultural element to that, which I am not offering a comment on. I'm just offering a comment as somebody who likes empowered women in comic books, that sometimes it was a confusing message. The movie, of course, could not have been at all more different. So, Freya, what did you think about the Dora Milaje in the movie?
I'm in love. I'm like that emoji with like a heart signs, you know, heart in their eyes. That's me. When it comes to Okeo, okay, am I saying it right? I'm sorry. When it comes to Okeo and Nakia, they're my heroes now. And oh my God, it was amazing. Especially like, you know, there's this scene in the South Korea when there the action scene when she was she was on the top of the car. Okay, was on the top of the car and Nakia was so driving. The fact that her dress was kind of floating like a cape, and it was red, and it reminded me of Superman, and it was like, everything just, and they just looked so beautiful. It just, you know, as a woman of color, like, you know, I mean, it was just to see like someone who is like made to look that beautiful, and it was just, I can't. I'm gonna be like this the whole time. They're just so much.
You have previously said, even talking about like the Ant-Man and Wasp trailer, that even seeing Wasp in her suit in that very brief action sequence, she's not a woman of color, but still a woman superhero, that you said to me, like, I would have been like some kind of crazy you'd be like a park ranger or something. Like you would be a totally different person if you had grown up as a little girl with that. So like, was that feeling even like amplified bigger by seeing this whole fleet of women with agency and power and
I mean, what I told you is like, I wouldn't have spent my early 20s trying to get over my what you call it, self-conscious, like, you know, what's a self-esteem problem. I wouldn't have any self-esteem problem if I see that. And the fact that there's gonna be little girls, like, you know, just not of color, just little girls,
period, and little boys and children of color and Black kids,
right? Everyone, like,
everybody.
Like the fact that they will be able to see that, and oh my God, I'm so happy. Like I can't. I'm not saying the movie is not without flaws. There are certain flaws, and you know, but the thing is, like, the fact that they got Dora Milaje right, because after reading Priest Run, I'm like, oh boy, whoa, what's gonna happen? I was kind of a little stressed about it, but oh my God, it was amazing. It was amazing.
Yeah, I've always grown up, I love female heroes. My bookshelf represents a lot of female heroes and writers. I mean, to the effect you can get them, since Marvel refuses to release a single female hero in oversized format other than Miss Marvel. And that's really important to me. And I had this moment of watching Wonder Woman where I was like, wow, like here it is on the screen. But, you know, my wife made a really good point about like, yeah, but after all the Amazon stuff, like Diana almost becomes the sidekick to a bunch of these dudes. And I think that's a fair assessment of Wonder Woman. And Black Panther, though, even though it's Black Panther's movie, they're never subordinate to his plot. Nakia, you could argue, is like the primary driver of the plot in a lot of ways. Right. Shuri is one of the primary drivers of the plot. What would anything have even happened without Okoye like keeping him safe and being his strategist? Which I don't mean to take away from the writing of Panther himself or the performance of Chadwick Boseman, but for me, this is a movie about the women. Right. Like it was just hugely powerfully about women.
And Nakia pretty much, like, you know, there was so many times, like, so in the movie, they started off like they had a relationship and they broke up. like it's the movie arrives there, there is nothing, the whole like don't freeze, that's where it comes, like he keeps on freezing anytime he sees her. Well, of course, Lupita Nyong'o, I would freeze if I'm around her, but so she so it's kind of arrives there, but she has her own agency in the sense that she wants to be out there and helping people. And the fact that the first scene with Black Panther, with T'Challa and Black Panther, was that it was so reminiscing of all the Boko Haram, like all those girls that was kidnapped and all of that, and the things that they had in this universe they had a Nakia to save them. It was like, oh my god. And at first you were like, oh, I mean, obviously, we know what Lupita Nyong'o looks like, but I wish I didn't, because then it would have been so much cooler to see her just kind of come up and then have all those things explored. But anyway, the thing is, like, I'm just gonna be like this the whole time. I'm sorry, I don't have any coherent things to say.
I've been trying, because I've only really talked about it with my wife so far, and so I'm like excited to talk about it to somebody else who doesn't. I mean, after you're married and you've been watching movies together for the past soon to be 20 years, like you kind of already anticipate a little bit what the other person's gonna say about the movie. Something that really struck me here is the kind of layers of responsibility versus symbolism. And I don't want to just talk about this kind of like film critique stuff, because other people are doing it much better than we're going to be able to do in 30 minutes.
Yes.
But also because I want to just talk about the fun parts. But, you have Black Panther, who's outwardly a symbol of the nation and who has, the mantle of the nation, who's saying like he would prefer to not get involved. Like he really only wants to be abroad if it's because of Wakandan interest. Then you have Nakia at the beginning of the movie, who's a spy and who's saying, I want to change the world, but I don't want to be seen. And then you have Killmonger, on a different part of this axis, who's like, I just want to alter the world for people who've been oppressed. And I don't really care if I'm a symbol or not, but I don't mind if you see me. And it's like almost like we can kind of plot them in terms of their nationalism and their symbolism and their visibility and their ability to kind of work behind the scenes. And it's interesting because they all go through a shift, right? Like Killmonger takes on the mantle of Black Panther. Nakia puts on the Dora Milaje robes. And ultimately, Black Panther decides that even though he's not going to go along with Killmonger's insane plan to supply people with weapons and destabilize governments all around the world, although maybe not that insane, he is going to finally take an interventionist approach to the rest of the world. So I just thought it was like a fascinating commentary. And then, like, where would you plot Captain America on that? Who's the ultimate symbol and the ultimate interventionist? And it really tracks to the problems he had in Civil War with like a governmental body telling him you can and cannot get involved in different places. Nakia is kind of like that same alignment, only she doesn't want to wear the symbol. She's like, don't tell me what I can and can't get involved in. I'm going to go and save these people because they need saving.
Right. And don't forget, okay. Oh my God, I'm going to completely destroy her name every time.
And she's my favorite character, but I really am terrible at names all the time, and I'm afraid to say it badly.
The actor who portrays her, her name is Dara Guraya.
Okay.
Like, I'm just saying. But anyway, so she's also another character who is also like, she's dedicated to Wakanda. She's dedicated to the throne. And she even herself, like, if you're talking about characters going through an arc, and she actually goes through an arc as well, because she like, Nakia comes to her after Black Panther is killed in the middle of like second act. Just beginning of second act.
Where Nakia's like, let's start the revolution, and Okoye is like, no.
Yes, so that's like, she herself goes through a thing as well, and she's also on the other spectrum of like, no, it's duty over hurt, pretty much, because
she's like so much of a symbol that she doesn't feel like she gets a say at all. She's like the same level of symbolism as Captain America, but completely on the other side of the scale in terms of feeling like she has her own agency versus the agency that she has to have on behalf of a nation.
Right. And the thing is, like, I think Dora Milaje is just as important to Wakanda as in terms of symbol as Black Panther is. So to her, and she's the leader of them. So as that, she has a certain, like, I have to be here. I don't care who sits in the throne. I have to serve them. And they like, she reminds them again, like, I understand Eric won the challenge. You don't like the outcome, but he won the challenge. And so he's the king. and I'm going to serve the king, whether I agree with him or not. And the thing is, and then she also goes through a change of that as well, because once she started seeing that Eric Killmonger is not going to be good for Wakanda itself, that's when she kind of, like, she had a change of heart. Well, she probably always had that change of heart, but she kind of decided to take action against that. But one thing I wanted to talk about, though, is that how cool was it, Killmonger's name change? The fact that I thought that was brilliant, because I think MCU does that so well, that the fact that Killmonger is not his real name, it's his nickname.
No, yeah. But they still managed to do it. Like, exactly. They don't just toss it away and only call him Eric the whole time.
Exactly. He's still Killmonger, but his name is Eric Stevens, and the reason he got Killmonger because he's been, like, all you see later on, when he takes off his shirt, and it was like, I was like, oh, okay. But
I think everybody who saw it had that reaction. I don't.
You're right.
Yeah, Michael B. Jordan. I mean, he's always been a very handsome gentleman, but there's something about him in this movie that's particularly sucks the breath out of him.
Yeah, with the hair, the body, and the scar. Oh my god. Okay. Anyway, let's not. And the attitude, like, yeah, the end scene, like, the fact that he kind of showed up to the throne room and then just said that, "Who am I? Tell them my name," and all of that. Oh my goodness. Anyway. So yeah, and the thing is, like, so you see all the scars, and the thing is, the reason he got the name because he killed all those people, and then he was like, even Ever K. Ross tells them that when we sent him to Afghanistan, whatever, or Iraq, he was killing people like video game, like, he honestly doesn't care, and he was the leader of a group that was actually destabilizing government. That's his role. So I was fascinated with that, and then also the second credit. That name change, I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah, so in the comic books, which we've been recently reading as part of this book club, the White Wolf, I think the important thing to understand about, if you want to be the kind of person who examines the difference between the comic books and the movies, and I'm switching earpieces now, so I'm not going to hear Faria if she talks for a moment, is that in the movie has brought together a couple of different parts of the generations of Black Panther and merged some parts of their story and spread apart other parts. So, for example, in the comic book, Claw kills T'Challa's father, T'Chaka. But in the movie, it's Claw killing T'Chaka's father. So that interaction has been moved back a generation. And while Shuri is very much Shuri in the comic books, who's, very smart and a second in command, and in the comic books, it's actually T'Chaka's wife, who's partially characterized as this, like, the original woman scientist inventor of Wakanda. So they've definitely taken a few of these generational elements and, like, moved them around, I think, to, like, really good impact. But I think part of what's interesting about that is it affects also, like, where the rest of the MCU lines up with this, because you see that, like, Killmonger is a kid back in 1992, so you have to think that, like, Black Panther was growing up in the 90s too. So any interaction that Wakanda had with America in the World War II era would have been probably Black Panther's grandfather. And we know that Cap's shield is made of vibranium in the MCU. So, like, Faria, one of her points was like, wow, wouldn't it have been nice to, like, get that scene, which we got in the comic book, of, like, how did they wind up getting the vibranium for the shield?
Right. No, I would have liked to see, like, one in the first Avenger, there was this montage of all the Howling Commandos and Captain America going and doing different things. If there was one kind of aspect of it that they arrived at Wakanda, and it was just kind of in the part of the montage, just kind of like a throwaway. You know how Claw was introduced in Age of Ultron, and everyone in the theater was like, "Ooh, Black Panther!" At that time there was no Black Panther mentioned. But the thing is, like, if it was, it's just a wishful thinking. I mean, whatever. But the thing is, let's not like, not talk about the fact that the beginning, at the very beginning, the starting, like, where you understand who is the narrator, because I
didn't even get that until I was on Twitter later and somebody said it, and I was like, oh, I didn't understand. So that whole sprawl at the beginning of the movie with the narration of the history of Wakanda is not, as we would all expect, T'Challa as a young kid hearing it from his father. It's actually Killmonger hearing it from his father.
Exactly. And the thing is, like, that to me, I actually realized it as I was going to go to bed. I came back.
Way later.
Yeah, way later. As I was going to go to bed, I'm like, oh, wait, I know who that is. like, you know, so yeah, it was and then that was a very interesting kind of like a very quick you kind of put it together, like, you know, you kind of give a whole introduction of Wakanda to those who doesn't necessarily know about it, and I thought it was very well done. And you know, that the whole vibranium thing and stuff like that, though I did hear some criticism is like, well, kind of takes away from the movie in terms of like, oh, the Wakanda to be all this technologically advanced, like they could have kind of done it a little bit differently. But I'm like, well, it doesn't need to. I mean, ultimately people knows what this is about. But I really enjoyed that. And the fact that it started in Oakland, California, which is also the beginning of the Black Panther movement. And that to me, that was brilliant in my opinion. And I was really hoping that project to be named Anita N. Hill project, but that wasn't necessarily the case. But yeah, it's like that whole, like the first scene, at first you're like, okay, you know, this happened, but then when you kind of start putting it together, like who that kid was and
who the other guy was, because it takes a while before you realize that it's the priest.
Right. Like, you know, so it's like, you know, the whole aspect of it was like, I thought was brilliantly done.
Yeah, I had a feeling at the beginning where it's like, wow, this movie has a lot of beginnings. Like it has the like history of Wakanda beginning. It has the Oakland beginning. It has the like picking up Nakia from her secret mission beginning. And it like takes a while before you really feel like you're into the movie. And at the time I was like in my seat thinking like, oh, I hope this doesn't like I hope this isn't weird and slow and just repetitive. But I think the movie absolutely pays it off because it feels like it was just a set of parentheses that continues paying itself off. You know, we pay off the Nakia mission with her later donning the Dora Milaje garb because that's the only thing that Shuri has for her. We pay off the Killmonger scene, you know, in Killmonger's crushing final lines before his death at the end. And then ultimately that in turn pays off the whole history of Wakanda, where he rejects the idea of being buried in Wakanda and being a part of this chain of history. And he says, no, like bury me at sea because I am, you know, I have more allegiance to all of these people who have been taken from their homes and been distributed like products by colonizing forces than I do to any history of Wakanda. And so I ultimately found the structure like really, and then of course, ultimately we get to the very end and they go back to Oakland. So I thought it was actually really satisfying. And I don't think you could have done that if you had like tried to cheekily break up some of those early scenes or like use them as flashbacks or something. It needed it to anchor the movie on either side. And I think it was very, very successful.
Right. And one of the cool things though, and this is something that I kind of knew before. So when I was kind of watching the movie, I was kind of figuring like, you know, it was very interesting to see. So the young T'Chaka is actually the real life son of older T'Chaka.
Yes.
So,
that blew my mind.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, they do look alike, and so to me, I was like, oh, that's amazing. The thing is, like, they're both actors. They're both from South Africa. Sorry, Atwanda Kani, who is a younger T'Chaka, and John Kani, who is an older T'Chaka, and they actually act the same.
For a minute, I was like, did they do one of those like de-aging things like they did on Michael Douglas and Ant-Man? Like because I was like so convinced. I'm like, these guys definitely look alike.
Right.
Not so my imagination.
Yeah, and they are, and the thing is, like, it feels like, okay, yes, this young T'Chaka will grow up to be the older T'Chaka. Yeah. You know, I mean, at that point, our exposure to T'Chaka was what we saw in the Civil War. Right. So yeah, so I mean, to me, I was kind of looking at it from that lens, and to seeing his actions or seeing his his kind of acting, I was like, yes, I can see that this young man becomes that older, wiser king. I mean, well, not necessarily so much wiser. I mean, some of the things that happened that he got up to, but
yeah. Well, let's talk about that. So one of the big contentions I've seen online, not a criticism, but just like a point of discussion that I've seen, is T'Chaka leaving young Eric behind. So, right. You know, he leaves his brother's body behind, and you can make an argument for that. You know, his brother disgraced the nation. You know, he himself is sorry that he had to kill him. Like, you could make a lot of excuses for why he doesn't bring his brother back to bury him. But he clearly knows that he has a child because he has this man on the inside, and he chooses not to bring Eric back to Wakanda, even though he clearly has royal blood, he clearly has standing to issue the challenge once we get him later in the movie. So what did you think? What do you think about that? Do you think that that really casts T'Chaka in like a irretrievably negative light more than the murder of his brother, that he left his nephew behind?
So the thing is, like, and you know, this is kind of becoming me being like, oh my god, I also read the comic. No, I mean, but the thing is, like, I was thinking more in terms of the comic, in the sense like Wakanda, in all its beauty and all its technological advance, is barely hanging on to a thread for in terms when it comes to peace. We will see that in the Ta-Nehisi's Coates run, and even in the Priest run, they are very war prone. You know, it's like pretty much like Black Panther was keeping it together, or like, you know, the king is keeping it together. So I don't know whether because of there was something else going on in the background that they just didn't want it to bring another issue to this, because the king needed to be king and they just didn't wanted that distraction at that time. So they made that decision. Like, he made that decision. And to me, I'm of that kind of, like, you know, I like to kind of, it's okay if you don't show me everything, and I just kind of make my own story along the way.
Yeah, I don't think I'm clamoring to have been shown it. I just think it adds, I mean, I think the big hit in the movie in terms of our opinion as viewers changing by proxy of T'Challa's opinion as the protagonist changing is when he realizes that his father killed his uncle, right? And we get him in disbelief of that, like when he almost dies and goes back to the, you know, to the spiritual plane. But to me, it's so much worse that he left this child behind who could have come back and been like a brother to T'Challa. And I understand he had reasons to do it, but I think it makes a really good point about, I don't know, like the consolidating tendency of him as Black Panther. Like, it's not just about keeping Wakanda protected, but like you said, like, protect the throne, like watch the throne. Like, that's, he couldn't introduce an element that was going to cause that kind of disruption and cause the 5 tribes to have that kind of attitude, even though it was the moral thing to do. And I think we see, even T'Challa, you have to wonder at the beginning of the movie, would he have left a child behind? Like, maybe he pulls Nakia right out of her rescue mission, and he's like, let's go. And he's going to kill the child soldier right there until Nakia stops him. And I think that he goes through a serious transformation, not just because of Nakia, but because of the revelations he finds out, where he realizes that being a king in a modern day has to be a lot more than that. And like, maybe it was enough for his father to do that. Maybe T'Chaka was a great king in that period. It's like when we read Stanley and Jack Kirby drawing Wakanda in 1966, and like, yeah, by our modern standards, it's pretty racist. By the standards of that time, it was also racist, but it's kind of like good on Lee and Kirby for doing something. You kind of say like, well, good on T'Chaka for being a king that protected Wakanda for that long, but that's no reason to not try to be better. And I like really appreciated that journey, which never got spelled out for us like in the forward part of the narrative, but is clearly happening behind the scenes and inside of the head of T'Challa.
Also, like, you know, at the beginning, when you come to Wakanda, the royal family is actually very isolationist. Like, you know, they are like, you know, Wakanda forever or Wakanda first is their thing. So I don't know how much of that child being half American also got to do with that.
Interesting. So, yeah, and we don't know who his mother was.
Yeah, who his mother, like, no, and he says it. My mother is American. Like, you know, T'Chaka's Njabu, I think his name was I have to keep the cast list open. Njabu. Like, you know, it's very possible that he was either he fell in love with an African American woman, and then had Eric. So the fact that he wasn't full-blooded Wakandan, whether that played a role as well. You know,
so what I want to do is, you just brought it up, is I want to kind of do a lightning round of like differences from the comic, not to be like, oh, we read the comic, but to say like, do you think it was a good decision, bad decision?
Do it because of that.
Yeah, and so we already talked about the Dora Milaje. Pretty much every single change to the Dora Milaje in the movie was a positive change. So let me throw out like a easy one. So in the comic book, Ramonda, who's played by Grace Jones, who gives a wonderful moment of being, or not Grace Jones, sorry, I've had Grace Jones in the brain, but Angela Bassett, because Grace Jones is the original person that people talked about being Storm back in the 80s when they were like dream casting X-Men. And then after Angela Bassett became famous, it became like Angela Bassett should be Storm. And Angela Bassett gives us this amazing Storm moment with when she has the white twists in her hair and she's on the mountain with Nakia, and I cried. I just saw it and I was like, that's Storm. Like, it should have been Storm back in 2000. So I feel like we got that moment. So in the comic books, Ramonda is actually the second wife of T'Chaka. She's from South Africa, and she's not T'Challa's biological mother. She's only the biological mother of Shuri. That was not specified in the movie. It might not be the case at all, and it seems like it wouldn't work at all for her to be from South Africa, given how isolationist Wakanda is in the movie. Do you think that was a good change, bad change, neutral change?
I would say that it's a like good change in the sense of narrative, because it's like, okay, so then we wouldn't be able to understand that why he left the kid behind, like, if you know what I mean. Like, it's like,
exactly, because Shuri would be the same almost as
exactly. And the thing is, like, speaking of the hair though, that hair is taken from Ta-Nehisi's Coates Run. Have you read it?
No, I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, so that's that's like, that's like carbon copy of like how Ramonda is in like Stalfreeze.
All credit to Brian Stelfreeze, who's a spectacular artist and visual. So I mean, crazy, because the movie was clearly already in production at the point that Stelfreeze was drawing this run that started in 2016. So the amount of behind the scenes that had to happen to line up what Stelfreeze was designing with the movie production designs was probably a breathtakingly hard process. And I think it was the best production design I've seen in any movie other than maybe Lord of the Rings. Like, it was, somebody who loves that stuff. I was just blown away by the production design.
No, if Christopher Priest Run is for like the influences and different story element that they kind of got together, then they just went to Ta-Nehisi Run's Coates Run for everything else, like all the world building and everything is directly taken from that. I'm already in issue 8 in, and I was reading, I read it after the movie, and I'm like, I saw this in the movie. So there's like a lot of that. So yeah, you're gonna have fun. I'm not gonna spoil too much, but you're gonna have fun on that. But yeah, so Ramonda's hairstyle comes directly from that.
So, okay, here's another, let's see, what's another book to movie difference here? So in the comic books, Claw, let's talk about Claw. So in the comic books, he's like a recurring foe of Black Panther, and he's like a being of pure sound, really, as a result of the first confrontation that Black Panther has with him in Fantastic Four 53. In the movies, he's seemingly dead, although nobody's necessarily forever dead in the Marvel Universe, even the movies. Do you think that the changes to Claw in the movie here worked, or do you think that we would have been better sticking closer to a comic book version of Claw?
I would think, well, first of all, if Claw was the main villain, then it would have become another one of those, a white man, like it becomes like a race divide thing, like, I don't think that would have necessarily worked. But first of all, I want to say how good Andy Serkis was. First of all, let's just talk about that, like how good Andy Serkis was as Claw. He was having the time of his life. And just turning on music because before they were running away, and then it just like it was amazing. But I don't think, like, I don't know, like he would become another cackling lunatic in Marvel Universe, like that's just there. And I don't know, to me I feel like he had a good arc. Like I'm happy that he's gone, in air quote. He was really fun while he was there, but I feel like he served his purpose, and it's okay. I'm happy.
I'm somebody who really gets annoyed when like every comic book movie villain needs to die, because you're just like you're cutting off the great thing about comic books, which is that continuity returns and develops. And I get that a movie's arc is different from a comic book's arc, and sometimes to make a movie villain satisfying, you've got to have them have an ending, and just having them like being taken away in handcuffs isn't always an ending. But I look at a lot of Marvel movies, like a great example, I don't think Ronan should have died. I think that was in Guardians of the Galaxy 1. I think that was a terrible decision.
Right.
Because I think that he would have been served much better by being imprisoned and then being able to be used again. But I found in this movie, I didn't mind Claw's death because he doesn't need to be that distraction for Wakanda anymore. In the comic book, you need to be able to bring back themes over and over again. And the theme of like the vibranium always being at risk, Claw is a way to bring back that theme repeatedly. And in a movie, you don't want to bring back themes repeatedly. You want to open up additional plots. And it didn't really feel to me like we were going to get anything different really from Claw unless they transformed him to sound. So like, I'm not happy that he died because Andy Serkis was incredible, but I was completely satisfied with the fact that he died and that Black Panther wasn't even the one to kill him, because that was very, very satisfying.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was gonna say, is that I am happy that he's gone, and I'm also happy that he died at the hand of not Black Panther. Like, you know, if it was like, oh, okay, Black Panther killed him, then okay, then, you know, we could have discussed that, the whole trope coming back again, like, you know, the villain getting killed by the hero. But in this case, it was actually much more nuanced than that. And to me, like, you know, I was okay with that.
Yeah, and to bring it full circle, we just came from an episode talking about the Black Panther comic books where T'Challa kills Claw, or at least seemingly on panel he kills Claw.
Right.
And if he had done in the movie, it would have been even more from the comic. But like I really felt like everything in the comic book was everything in the movie was a little bit of a twist from the comic. Even the way that they played the Killmonger plot in the movie is very much how they play the plot of Queen, one of the Dora Milajes in the comic book that we just read, where she kind of comes back to be a wild card potential leader of one of the tribes of Wakanda. So I like the Christopher Priest one has all of this DNA, but it's all been put in a blender for the movie. So I feel like we've alluded this to a little bit before, but Killmonger in the comic book dies multiple times, and Christopher Priest even makes fun of it when he brings him back here, that he's like back from the dead for the second time. Do you think it was satisfying for him to die in the movie instead of being an ongoing antagonist as he tends to be in the comic book?
Yes, to be honest though, for his arc to be completed, and especially like, you know, we got that ending moment, because as I was watching it, I'm like, there will be one moment that he will get to see that sunset, because that's so what I really kind of, I enjoyed it a lot, like, you know, enjoyed his whole arc a lot. And I don't know, I'm not a movie creator or creator in any way. I don't know how else to make his arc satisfied. Like, I don't know that. And the thing is that the fact that he ended that line and he was pretty much providing the, you know, we can talk about like Malcolm X to T'Challa's Martin Luther King is the laziest trope I can ever think of. But, you know, we're going to go with that. So I don't know how else to do that. But to me, what really kind of stuck between the juxtaposition between the two is that when T'Challa goes into, like, you know, the other world, I'm not sure the name of it, and, you know, he arrives as a full adult. You know, he arrives as an adult, and he had a discussion with his father.
Oh, this is such an interesting point.
Yeah, and
keep going. I see where you're going.
Yeah, and then, you know, the father tells him that a good man can never be a king, which, I mean, I was kind of like, that's the thesis statement of Priest Run. That's the thesis statement of this movie. And however, when it comes to Eric Killmonger, when he goes into this other world, he arrives as a child. He arrives as the child the day when his father died, which pretty much signifies, you can think of it as a signifying that his life ended that day.
Yeah,
you know,
in a way he hasn't grown.
Right.
In one way, he hasn't grown.
Right. You know, he's inside, he remained that child. So a lot of his things that he kind of says is kind of childish. You know, it's not like a full-grown adult person would not probably try to have a simplified solutions to a lot of problems that he talks about. But the thing is, like, he arrives at a child, and first of all, we're jumping all over the place, but how good Sterling K. Brown was. I mean, that whole interaction with him. But the thing is, at the end of that, he actually is an adult. You know, he arrives as a child, but he is an adult.
And they really did some great production design things where they had him dress the same as the child in that same
right.
It's just this to me is like a movie that's really like on its stuff. Is like, not only was the script great, not only was the directing of the actors great, but like even the production design like told that narrative, and it all made it more powerful. And it's just that there was every Killmonger scene was so heartbreaking to me, because I think that his point of like, how can you sit here and say that you're the one unconquered nation and know that people from all over this continent have been done such wrong and made into slaves and traded all around the world, and not do anything. And his solution of like making them all into the armed resistance to overthrow the colonizers, like, part of me is like, okay, well, that's like, that, how practical is that? So you're just going to overthrow all the governments in the world? But then part of me is like, yes, that's practical. Go overthrow all the governments in the world, because most of them are not willing to make any kind of reparations. There's no putting it back, and all of the government is built on the oppression of these people. So yes, overthrow them. I'm like, now I feel like I'm going to be in some FBI watch list for saying this on YouTube. But like, in terms of Killmonger's character, it was, I found, and I found a lot of people on the internet that I've been talking to in the past couple of days were like, while I wouldn't make that choice, I certainly can't argue against the fact that he holds that position.
Right. And the thing is, that's also kind of we talked about it before as well, that the difference between African experience and African American experience. So, and honestly, like, I know of, I have some friends from Kenya, and, when you talk to them about race and all that, they have a complete different understanding or perspective on it than when you talk to someone who is African American. And that's something kind of brought, like, I was actually thinking about that, because I had the very similar discussion with them, and they don't feel as oppressed, or they don't feel, because they that's their life. It's like, it's I don't know how to say it without being extremely racist, or it's just like that's what they see. Versus if you talk to an African American person about race, they will give you a complete different answer. And that's something what we saw between Eric Killmonger and Eric Killmonger and T'Challa, because one of them is, they're both Wakandan in a way, but one of them is American Wakandan and the other one is Wakandan.
Oh, I have so much to say about this. Yeah. So one of the interesting experiences I've had living in New Zealand, which is for people who are for the first time watching my channel, I moved to New Zealand in 2016 from the States, is there's very, very small Black population here, and Latina population here, Latinx there's just really not any. And there's much, much more Asian continent and Asian Pacific Island population here.
Right.
And so it's weird to me, growing up in Philadelphia, which is like a very, very diversity, with a huge portion of its population being African American and being Latino, is that the people are not as visible here in the community. But then the other thing is, like, really early on in being here, I happened to meet somebody who was Afro-Caribbean. She's from Jamaica. And it really occurred to me, that thing that you were just saying of like, whatever baggage I might have in my personal relations as having an unavoidable amount of white supremacy in my life by virtue of being white, no matter how much I want to reject it. Like, my relationship to Blackness is different here in New Zealand, because I'm not relating to somebody who's part of the American Black experience. And that's all I know how to talk to somebody who's within. I don't have friends that are from Kenya or, Egypt or South Africa or, any of these other, Cameroon, any of these other places. So that's my only experience. And I think it's helped me understand this cultural difference in a way that I never did before. Like, when I was in America, I just thought that like that was the quote unquote Black experience. And that's like part of my white supremacy, that like I never conceived of the fact that the Black experience didn't have to have that oppression built into it in the same kind of way all around the world. And so I'm always like learning and growing in that way, but I feel like living here and seeing that with my own eyes opened up my ability to understand just how different Killmonger's experience was in the movie. I want to hear you talk a little bit about the difference between Killmonger and Nakia in the movie, because they actually have very similar aims. But Nakia is coming from it from the Wakandan experience, and Killmonger is coming to it from the American experience.
Right. And I think that's kind of like the idea of like traveling, like what traveling or being exposed to other culture does to you. Because I can okay, I'm just saying it, but the thing is, like, I saw a lot of myself in Nakia, in the sense that, you know, how she's out there and she's kind of she knows she can speak Korean. She's like, you know, being a spy for a Nigerian, or, you know, I'm not sure what was the first one. Like, you know, she was doing a spying thing, and I don't know how many other languages she speaks, and you know, how many other places she has been. But the thing is, like, it changed her perspective. So even though she grew up as a Wakandan, but after being out there, she has a complete different perspective of it. Versus, like, you know, and I saw that myself, because I grew up in Bangladesh, but when I moved to other places, I saw all these different people. And I also, like, you know, learned that me, from being a Muslim background, that my Muslim background is completely different as someone who is from Syria or someone from Lebanon, you know. And it's like, so there's like all these different perspectives, and so I think she learned from that. Versus Eric Killmonger, even though he's Wakandan, he never stepped foot in Wakanda before that day, you know, when he brought Claw's dead body in. And he was like, he knew he was Wakandan, and he was just angry at all these people who just killed his father and left it. And all he saw was African American experience. All he saw was like the racism of America, or like, you know, all the people that are dying, and, you know, all these things. So yeah, so two of them, even though kind of have the similar outlook, but because of their experience, it's completely different. Like, so,
and I think that's part of what made the third act so satisfying. Like, I think in another Marvel movie, that same fight could have been annoying or kind of dumb, because it just was a lot of people hacking at each other, that suddenly you're like, what, are you all going to kill each other now? But it wasn't, because every time you got two characters bumping into each other, it also was a representation of whatever ideological divide they had that we had already had in the movie. So seeing Nakia fight against Killmonger was incredibly powerful. Seeing Shuri fight against Killmonger was incredibly powerful, but not just because we were rooting for the characters, but because it represented ideologies that had gone in totally different directions, especially Nakia and Killmonger, because you're like, you both want the same outcome, but only one of you can, you know, use the ends that you want to justify the means that you want, and it's who's going to win in this physical confrontation. And I was never sure that somebody was not going to die. I was pretty sure Shuri wasn't going to die, because it just seemed like a weird character to sacrifice. But I was not convinced that they weren't going to kill Nakia, because I'm like, Lupita's a big star. She's the romantic interest. Like, I really had my fears that she was going to die in that moment. And so it was, so that was huge, I thought.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, also, like, if you think about Shuri's perspective of being Wakandan, because she's the smartest person, she's smarter than Tony Stark, and I think she mentions it herself. And, you know, she discovered sneakers. She created sneakers.
Yeah, it was so great.
And the thing is, like, she was pretty much the cue to the, you know, but to bring the James Bond aspect of it. And but because she's young, she actually has a lot more younger generation opinion of, like, of globalism, pretty much.
Right, like, she shows no hesitation to saving Martin Freeman whenever K. Ross gets shot. She's like, of course we're gonna do it. We have the technology. Why would we not? And that's her perspective a lot through the movie, which has its risks, as we've seen with Tony Stark. But, like, a lot of the place Shuri comes from is like, why would you not help if you have the technology? Which, if you think about it, is almost more like the Killmonger perspective. Like, Shuri and Nakia are like two halves of the Killmonger perspective. Nakia wants to help the people, but she doesn't want to give away as many of the resources. Shuri is like, why wouldn't you give away the resources? But she's almost like driven more from the sharing of the knowledge than she is from the helping the people sometimes. And so that's why I thought that confrontation in the third act was, like, so satisfying to see the two of them fight Killmonger. I'm like, in a very slightly different version of events, you could all be on the same side.
Exactly. And but I don't know.
So I want to talk about one last comic to film difference, and then we can leave a couple parting shots. So in the comic book, at a point, Shuri does become the Black Panther, and she kind of, in a way, remains. I haven't read all of that Jonathan Mayberry run. That's who I've actually met. Really cool guy. But she kind of remains Black Panther. Like, even when T'Challa comes back, she's, like, still symbolically the Black Panther for a while. And Nakia in the comic book is, like, this disgraced Dora Milaje who becomes a villain, Malice. In the movie, we almost get, like, a slightly different spin on both of those things. Angela Bassett as Ramonda offers Nakia the heart-shaped herb on the path to the mountains. And I was like, oh my gosh, is Lupita going to be the Black Panther? But she turns it down because she's the wisest character in the movie, I think. But we get this tickling that, like, it wouldn't be Okoye who would be a Black Panther necessarily if it had to be replaced by a woman. It would probably be Nakia. And then with Shuri, with the gauntlets at the end, you get a little bit of a tease, I thought, of Shuri as Iron Man, which I thought, like, parallels a little bit the creation of Riri Williams in the Marvel Universe as this one of the smartest, and all you know, as one of the smartest girls in the universe, and that she puts on the Iron Man armor. And so I'm just wondering how much the films are going to play with these tropes. Like, are we ever going to see a Shuri Black Panther, or would it be a Nakia Black Panther? Are we ever going to see a Riri Williams Iron Man, or would it be Shuri as Iron Man? I'll put $50 on Shuri being in the Iron Man armor in one of the next 2 Avengers movies. I think it's going to happen.
So there is a lot of speculation in from the trailer that one of the scene of Iron Man is probably not Iron Man, like not Tony Stark in it, and everyone is like, oh, it's Pepper Potts. I'm like, ugh, whatever.
We've seen it. You know, I liked it when it happened, but we've seen it.
Like, yeah, we've seen it, and honestly, I'm not a big fan of Gwyneth Paltrow, but that's okay. The thing is, like, yeah, that's for another episode. But the thing is, like, yeah, it would be very interesting to see Shuri as Black Panther, as Iron Man, but the little woman of color in me would rather have Riri Williams because, I wouldn't, because there is not enough role to go around, and I don't want, like, like a woman of color, 2 women of color to be combined into one. Yes. I'm all for, making, like, Bucky Barnes to be the White Wolf and then taking another white character out of it by all means. But, this is me being, like, white racist, or what is it that called? But anyway, I don't want it just because of that. I think
that's a fantastic point. I'm like, I wouldn't be surprised by it, but I do kind of hope Shuri gets her own path. I hope that they didn't, like, push her this far to be this cool just to, like, sub her in. But at the same time, like, I don't know if the Marvel Cinematic Universe can resist the symbolism of it, Like,
and
they don't have as much real estate as the comic book. They don't have 12 issues a year to, like, create a Riri Williams. So I don't know if they can resist.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, and that to me, though, I was a little peeved by Iron Man 3 that when there was a young child character that could have easily been Riri Williams, and I don't know whether Riri Williams was maybe not published yet.
Oh yeah, that was years before Riri.
Right, but the thing is, like, I'm pretty sure Bendis was thinking about it, or I don't know. And honestly, I can't speak to that. I don't know that. But the thing is, like, to me, the whole reason, like, I'm kind of tired of Iron Man. I am. Like, Robert Downey Jr., he comes and he does his thing, but I'm a little bit wary of, like, I'm a little bit tired of it. So I wouldn't mind if the Iron Man character has been retired altogether and the future generation of Avengers takes over. Like, if Black Panther becomes the Iron Man, kind of takes over that aspect of it. Because at this point, I feel like, saying that, oh my God, the Iron Man was the best solo movie ever because, it started all of this. It's saying that, oh my God, Peter, your parents are responsible for crushing Krisis. They're not, I mean, yes, we're so happy that Mr. and Mrs. Marinari, had you, but, it's you, Peter. Like, so it's kind of feels like the similar way for me is that, let's kind of retire Iron Man.
All right, so 2 quick hits to wrap it up, and I'll answer these questions too. What do you think? What was your least favorite moment in the movie, or what moment bothered you or annoyed you?
I was really bothered by T'Challa dying in the middle, because I'm like, we have all seen a movie. Come on, is anyone buying this? Like, what was the point? Like, we know that, like, no one ever thought that. We saw the trailer. We saw.
Right. We know there's scenes we haven't seen. Like, you can't pull a fast one on us.
Right. So I didn't.
I think my most annoying thing was. Oh, I'm sorry. Please continue.
No. What I'm saying is that I understand why they needed to do that and have that, but the fact that we saw all these other characters being so sad about it, like, I was like, we know that's not a thing, like, you know. So that to me wasn't like, and honestly, I can't, as someone who never made a single movie in ever, I can't tell you how to.
Well, I think, clearly he was coming back, but to me, the tension that I enjoyed from that, which I do not mean to invalidate that being the most annoying part of the movie for you, but I'm just saying, for me, the tension that created was how to get him back. Because I think that I was like, are we going to go through the paths of the dead, which is something that frequently happens with Black Panther in the comic book. Is Doctor Strange going to show up? Like, it's kind of funny, like, death has lost meaning in the middle of the movie because you know that a shocker like that is not going to happen in the same way that death has lost meaning in a comic book. But it's like, the answer is like, how do you bring him back? And in the in comics, that's really the measure of any character dying. We know they're all going to come back, but is it going to be good? And so I kind of like felt like that was a very comic bookian part of the comic book-esque part of the movie. Like, all right, he died, but how are we going to get him back?
Right. Yeah. And also the rhinos at the end. I was like, okay. I mean, I know they set it up because he was feeding the rhino and stuff, and it's fine. And to be honest, at that time, I'm like, that's fine. It's just a MacGuffin you guys do. That's okay. But we didn't talk about M'Baku and the Jabari tribe.
That's a whole other. And how well done it was. Like, they just totally fixed the M'Baku problem from the comic book. Permanently fixed it.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, let's not call them Mane because no. And the thing is, like, he is like, Duke Wilson was amazing. His comedic time was amazing. When he first showed up, you were scared. You were like, holy, like,
he's a big dude.
Exactly, like, things are about to go down, especially the first challenge and all of that. But then, then in the end, he was like, it was very satisfying to
for those of you who have not read the comic books, like, that's him. That's M'Baku. He's literally a dude in a giant gorilla body with a person face.
Right.
In the comic books.
And some parts of it is still there because their entrance is still a gorilla, and and they still live in like like a very snowed colder part of the region. Wakanda, apparently Wakanda is not all like it snows in Wakanda.
Right, there's mountains. There's elevation changes in Wakanda.
Yeah, exactly. So so it was really fun to see that, and also fun to see that they kind of updated it, just very similar to Dora Milaje. It was updated, so it was really good to kind of see them, and the fact that the whole thing that we're vegetarian, that was
really funny. I mean, I really enjoyed how much they messed with Martin Freeman as Everett Ross. Like, I didn't really see him as being dweeby enough to be Everett Ross when he appeared in Civil War, but he's so dweeby in this movie. We were talking about this a little bit on chat.
Right.
Do I have the comic book here? He looks so much like him, and I don't know how they did it. In the comics, he looks almost like a little kid. Like, he has this like tiny head. Or no, this big head on like a tiny body, and I feel like they made it work in the movie. And I don't know if it's just the way they tailored his suits or whatever, but like, it really, really worked for me, and I just felt like I was seeing him right off the page.
To be honest, though, a little part of me kind of thinking, I mean, how awesome would it have been if they could get Matthew Perry to do this?
Oh, Matthew Perry would have been really good. Because and I like Matthew Perry.
Everett K. Ross, the reason we are saying that because Everett K. Ross was created by Christopher Priest.
Was he based on Matthew Perry from Friends?
He was based on Chandler Bing.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying, because the thing is, like, Christopher Priest himself is out there saying he created this character based on Chandler Bing. So imagine if I know he's much older now. I mean, Matthew Perry doesn't look like, his Chandler days
anymore. Depends on if he's on the coke or not at any given time. If he's on the coke, then you look good.
I think he's doing better now.
Yeah,
but the thing, good for him. Yeah, good for him. But the thing is, like, if they could do that, that would have been like, oh my god, that would have been so good. But yeah, and another thing I quite didn't like is necessarily, well, I don't know. I'm kind of like it's very in the middle for me about that. Like, the Ross with the fighter pilot thing. I'm kind of neutral about that. It's not okay.
So for me, I think like both the rhinos and the fighter pilot felt earned enough. Like, part of me was like, look, I get that the third act of the movie can't just be a one-on-one fight and you need scope. And I feel like Martin Freeman as Everett K. Ross driving the stuff. Like, I feel like we'd earned that. The rhinos, like, it was a little bit dumb, but we had earned it. Part of me is just like, where's my Marvel Legends rhinos toys? Right? Like, I bought the whole wave of the Black Panther toys because I wanted to build a figure of Okoye. And I'm like, so where is the rhino that they get to ride? Because it's clearly like a toy tie-in kind of choice in the movie. So so those things all bug me a little. I think there was some creaky CG at a couple points. At one point during the first challenge with M'Baku at the waterfall, there's like a point where it's like not quite painted out right on the side of his head. I'm like, come on, people. This is like going to be one of the highest profiting movies of all time. But the only choice that like really truly bothered me in the movie was the fact that they were relying on the sonic disruptors of the train to disrupt their suits at the end. And that they had their masks on so much. Like, I get that it made the CG easier and it gave tension and had the bullet train and stuff, but I just wanted their damn masks off. Like, it was a personal confrontation, and I just wanted to see it play on their faces more, and I felt so cheated that they were all in their costume for so much of the confrontation because it was so personal and the stakes were so high. That was the only moment. I'm super critical of movies. I'm the kind of person who can say, well, I like that movie, but here's 25 things about it that were bad or wrong. Yeah. That was the only point in the movie where in the theater I was like, God damn it. It was the only point.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, the CGI was not the best in that moment, though, because there were a certain point I'm like, oh, you know, it kind of went into the whole Justice League mustache situation in a couple of situations.
Nothing could be that bad. Nothing could be quite as bad as that.
No, but and also, like, by the way, like, as someone with like accent, I am always kind of a little bit about accent. Like, and the thing is, obviously, it's a fictional accent. The Wakandan accent is a fictional accent. I get that, but
that makes it even more impressive that they all did it so consistently, because it's not like you could just like get a recording of somebody doing it and be like, okay, that's how people talk there. Like, yeah, that's all kind of good, but there are time to time a couple of situations I think they reverted to their original accent. There are very, like, and the thing is, like, I only figured it out because I have an accent and I sometimes revert back to my accent, like, you know, especially if you ask me to say Thursday, it's like I have to kind of think about it. Like, what other way would you say Thursday?
Like, from time to time, you would see a little bit of my Indian accent comes out. So, you know, so I kind of look for that. So a couple of times, Danny Okolo, I'm gonna butcher his last name, but Danny, what's his last name? The guy from Get Out.
Yes.
Like, he done it perfectly. You know, he done it perfectly throughout because, you know, I think he is from, like, you know, he was raised in an African nation but he grew up in England. So he done it perfectly. But there are a couple of other times, especially Angela Bassett, who I don't think was, like, you know.
That was my wife said that was the only thing. And I was like, how dare you? How dare you say something about Angela Bassett? She's like, well, she just had a couple moments, and I've loved her ever since What's Love Got to Do with It. So I'm like, you cannot say anything negative about her. But
I know, this is me being like a completely nitpicky.
But I think it goes to show, if anybody's coming in at this point or is fast forward to this point, we just spent an hour talking about how masterful this movie is. Like, our nitpicks amount to like rhinos, a little bit of digital background, wanting to see their face in the fight more, and accents. Like that. That's all. It's so I always say that I need to see and you have one more to add to the
no, I want to say one more thing. Like, we should not talk about the world building of Wakanda. That's gonna be a huge disservice if we do that. And honestly, I cannot wait for you to read Ta-Nehisi's quotes run, because it was picture perfect, picked up from there and then shoved into the screen. A lot of it. I mean, and especially like the Jabari tribes one is more for press run, that what we have seen. But the thing is, the rest of it, the world building, and also like everyone was so different. They had all this and everything was based on African culture, like in African culture. And there is a young woman, she put it together in Twitter that where all the different influences came from.
I saw that. It was really awesome.
It's like, you know, to kind of see that, it was like, oh, it was amazing. And also their dress ups, their dresses, like, you know, especially like when he kind of with Nakia, he comes down the stairs at the club. Oh, everything was just like so well done.
Yeah. Sometimes I get annoyed when movies that are really good come out in February because I'm like, is anybody going to remember them come Oscar voting the next year? But like,
Oh,
if this movie doesn't get nominated for costume design, this
oh
is
my
not
God,
just like
no.
a comic book movie fanboy moment. Like I
Right,
am a fan of films, and the costume design and the production design of this movie were not only just off the charts beautiful, but had so much depth, so much research and grounding in things from the real world as people are revealing to us that understand
right,
these references, and added to the world building. You know, there are points that like I think about like Mbaku's throne room with all of the wood hanging on all of the sides of the room to
right,
create those kind of like walls that were constantly like undulating a little bit. Um, all you know, you don't have to do that as a production designer. You could have had a freaking wall. Somebody
right,
decided to do that and put in the time to fabricate those materials and decide how they were going to look on camera and spray paint the wood and all that stuff. And like that's a decision that adds to the movie. Like somebody, just because they wrote in the script, the throne room looks like that, and just because the concept artist drew it like that, doesn't mean the production design is going to hit that mark. And the movie hit the mark again and again and again all throughout the movie on that, and it part of the world building. It's what made the world feel so real, so tangible, what made Wakanda pop off the screen in a way. And even the techno jungle underneath Wakanda, which we see several iterations of the
right.
mines, and we see the people working in, which stretches back to Kirby. But I just think that they like put the time in to make all these things pop off the screen in the movie, and it was, I just think amazing. It was amazing. So
Right. Yeah,
here's
especially the wall in Shuri's lab. Like, it has like had like a little bit of graffiti
Oh, I
feel
loved
to
it. I
it.
definitely noticed that.
Like
Yeah.
that's also something like, they didn't need to do that. Like,
No.
but they chose to do that. And yeah, I completely agree. Like, especially for hair and makeup, costume design, and for production design, they like, they have done far and above beyond the comic book, and they deserve an Oscar nomination.
Yeah. So let's close with we talked about the one thing that maybe annoyed us a little and turned into a list of 4 or 5. I always say that I like to see a Marvel movie twice before I really place it where I think it's going to rank in the list of Marvel movies, because the first time you're just reacting, and then the
Right,
second time you get to really decide if it's going to hold up. And for
right,
me, like a movie that holds up is Winter Soldier. I could not tell you
right.
how many times I've probably watched Winter
Yes,
Soldier 50 times. I mean, we watch it at
right,
least once a month.
right.
Um,
Okay.
but then there's movies that I really liked in the movie theater and that totally don't hold up for me at all. Like Civil War to me didn't hold up as much. It just doesn't. It's not as fun for me to rewatch.
Okay.
It's kind of just all, for me, it's like all action beats, and like it's not as thrilling as Winter
Right.
Soldier. So with knowing that we haven't seen it for a second time yet, where do you think that Black Panther is falling in your pantheon of these 18 Marvel movies?
So I kind of like, I've talked about it before in another live stream. It's like I judge, especially with the Marvel movies, based on what the challenges they had up against, and
Hmm.
how well they kind of done that. Based on that, this is going to be my number one. I mean, and it's not something I'm saying it just because I just saw it, or it's because, because it's like what they were up against. Like they had to set the world of Wakanda. They had to take a character who is like, I mean, let's face it, he's an African hero, African superhero, something that is not normal. And
And he's never been an A-list character, except
right,
probably up until the moment that, even though I love him, up until the moment that Ta-Nehisi Coates began writing him, he has never been an A-list Marvel character.
right. And the thing is, like, even I, as a comic book reader, I've just gotten onto the whole Black Panther bandwagon, and I read like all these comics, and now I'm a Black Panther expert. But before then, I didn't didn't know about him, and I'm not ashamed to admit that. So the fact that they took that character and made him compelling, made the villain to be compelling, which is something and big achievement in Marvel Universe.
He's by far the best villain of the entire Marvel universe. I don't think anybody can make any kind of credible argument, other than maybe Loki, that any other villain is as good as Killmonger is here.
And it took Loki 3 movies to get to that.
Yeah.
It took him 3 movies to get to that, versus he did it in 1 movie. And the thing is that the way the ladies are portrayed and everything, like it was, to me, that it is really is number 1. And and the thing is, like, for a reference perspective, like, so Winter Soldier is going to be my number 2, and and the most controversial of it all, and Guardian of the Galaxy will probably be somewhere there, because they were also up against a huge, like a huge challenge. So yeah, in terms of solo movie, it's the best. Like I said, like it's time we retire that. Oh, Iron Man is the best. It's time we retire that. You know, we get it. But you know, they also had Robert Downey Jr. We get it. But I feel like it's in terms of that, it's number one. Where would you put it?
I come from a really similar perspective on it, where you say what they're up against. For me, it's like, it's hard to just do a pure superhero movie. And Marvel superheroes are not pure superheroes, right? They're not like Superman who just flies around and gets cats out of trees like 24 hours a day. Marvel heroes are predicated on being broken a little bit, except for Captain America, because he's from the golden age before Stan Lee invented this idea that every hero had to be broken. And even Captain America started as this scrawny kid. So I think with Marvel movies, my bar that you have to cross is like, you've got to do more than do a superhero movie. Maybe the first movie you can get away with it, right? But even then it's like a little dull to me. And I think that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has like caught on to that and said, okay, when we do these solo movies, rather, you know, or even Guardians, basically everything but Avengers, it's got to be some other thing other than just a superhero movie. You know, like Thor Ragnarok was like a crazy space adventure comedy, buddy comedy movie.
Right.
It wasn't just a Thor movie. And so I think that that's how I grade, and that's why Winter Soldier is one of my favorites. That's why Guardians of the Galaxy is one of my favorites. They could have just done a straight up Star Wars good against evil riff, but it's so funny. It's got so much heart in it that the first one, the second one blows chunks, that it's thrilling. And so I think Black Panther did that. They made a movie. It felt to me, the nearest analog I can think of a movie that's like Black Panther is Elizabeth, the movie with Kate Blanchett as like the Elizabeth Queen of England, and like all what she goes through against like Mary Queen of Scots and all. I love British monarchy movies. And I think that this movie was as good and as powerful a genre movie of that. And I don't even think it's a superhero movie, but we've been reading these Christopher Priest books, and Christopher Priest even says in the book that Black Panther's not a superhero. So of all the Marvel movies that shouldn't be a superhero movie, Black Panther is that movie, and yet he's still a superhero. And so I think it's comparable to Winter Soldier. I think it's comparable to Guardians, and I think it's comparable to Thor Ragnarok, which I have my doubts about how well it's going to hold up because it so much relies on laughs, and I don't know if they're going to play the same the second time. But I think Black Panther's, it's easily going to be in my top 3. It could possibly also be my favorite.
Right. Yeah, and so before we kind of wrap up over here, let's talk about Bucky Barnes at White Wolf.
I know you've been waiting so patiently ever since the end of the previous episode.
I know I've been waiting very patiently for that. Because...
So why don't you, before we get into it, can you just explain who is the White Wolf in the comic books? Because it's not Bucky Barnes.
Right, it's not. It's
while you explain it.
In comic books, there's a plane crash in Wakanda, and there's one child survive. The child is Caucasian, and the King T'Chaka actually adopts the child and raises as his own. And however, he becomes the head of I'm forgetting their name. This elite army whose job is pretty much to kind of kill any enemies of the throne, and he's very dedicated and loyal to Wakandan throne. And however, he always realized that he's never going to be the king because he was white, and not only that, but he's also adopted. So he takes the name of White Wolf, and he kind of goes around and then serves the interest of Wakanda against T'Challa's even though T'Challa tells him not to do that. So yeah, and that character, like his character arc, is very, very similar to Loki and Thor. So that's
here he is in the comic book. He almost looks like this like old film star.
Right, he does.
He's got the little pencil mustache and the slicked hair. He's older because he's older than T'Challa, and you get the sense that he's like the deep state. Like he's got his own political motivations and things that he feels the need to protect that may not line up with the public face of Wakanda, but he's sure that he's doing it for the right reasons, even though sometimes it's a little bit villainous. So it's this very kind of like morally gray character who does what he has to do. Very much like X-Force in X-Men, where they like kill when they've got to kill. That's what the White Wolf is in the comic book. So now in the movie, we hear Shuri say to Bucky Barnes, that he's the White Wolf as they bring him out of his popsicle drawer and thaw him out. Or the kids.
It's the kids. The kids are like, because the thing is that you see that, in the second hour, like you see a bunch of kids just kind of looking over on top of someone, and you are not in the theater that I was in, everyone's like, Captain America, and I'm like, oh my God, is that gonna be bearded Captain America? I'm not ready for this. No, you can't do this to me.
You need more time to get ready.
I needed more time. I wasn't ready for it, but no, it turned out to be. It turns out to be Bucky Barnes. He's recovering as we see him. That's where he was last left after Civil War. And as he comes out of the tent, the kids are like, White Wolf, White Wolf. They kind of run around, and then he kind of comes and have a discussion with Shuri. And we come to find out that the other broken white boy that Shuri talks about is actually him. So. Yeah, so
which sets up some really interesting elements for Infinity War, because it's like, well, that clearly is why Cap is going to go to Wakanda at some point. The Avengers are going to be on their back foot and take some kind of loss, and Cap is clearly going to go to Bucky for reinforcements, and because we keep seeing the scene where Cap is in Wakanda at some point in Infinity War ever since like the first trailer, and so clearly that's going to get us there.
Yeah, and I already have an emotional moment in the previous live video, but the thing is, like, if somewhere along the line, I'm gonna repeat it. If T'Challa calls Captain America his brother, oh.
I don't know if I could. I'm a crier. Like, I really cry during movies because things get me. More so even before we had a kid, but even before then, like, I would definitely cry at movies. But now I just cry all the time. Great example, the Muppets movie, the first one that came back with Jason Segel and Amy Adams. I cried 8 separate times in the movie theater during that. Yeah. I've grown up with the Muppets my whole life, and every time there would be some big Muppet moment with like Muppets that I love my whole life, like, this is really amazing that they did this. There were probably whole periods of Black Panther that I cried, like, and not just for like Killmonger's last line, which I think is one of the iconic final monologues in film. But and again, I'm not just being like a comic book nerd. It was powerful.
And it's the fact that it's an MCU movie, it's a comic book movie. Yeah, that line. But anyway, continue. Sorry.
But I just cried. I just cried to cry. I just cried at the Black excellence on the screen. I cried at the feminism of this movie again and again and again. I cried. I cried at how spectacular the performances were, and that Coogler assembled this cast of like world-class, award-winning. Almost every one of them has won some crazy, amazing award, whether it's like an Oscar, an Emmy, a BAFTA, like, and just like that, and I just was stunned by it. And even as somebody who, I read this amazing essay that I tweeted the other day. I'll see if I can find it so I can tell you the woman's name, but it was about identity and watching Black Panther, and how, as a Black woman, that it meant so much to her to see her identity portrayed in a positive way on the screen and as a superhero on the screen. Her name is Comics Boz, COMIXBAWSE, and it's on her WordPress site, and I tweeted it yesterday, and it's an amazing article. But the point I'm trying to make in referencing that was, I wasn't there to see me on the screen. Like, I guess I got to see a guy being a superhero on the screen, but I was just there to see this great movie. And yet it even was like so powerful and moved me so much to see this amazing cast of color succeed and achieve and just like kill it and make possibly one of the best superhero movies ever made. And that for me was an emotional moment. And I hope it's one we get to see a lot more of on the screen in the future with some of these movies that are going to be headlined by women and headlined by characters of color, because it's powerful. And I think that there's no reason that we need superhero movies and superhero TV and superhero media and superhero comic books that are default white and default male, because Black Panther just showed us that you can be the best on the block and not do that.
Right. And the thing is, like, I think that time and time again, that has been proven that anytime you make a good movie, people are going to go see it. And, I don't know how long it will take for Hollywood execs to kind of get that to their head, but I really hope they do. And the day they will have Kamala Khan show up in MCU or wherever, I'm going to be done.
It's not, like, it's got to be on the next phase. There's no way they give, Especially after seeing the success of Black Panther, there's no way that they don't do Kamala. There's no way.
I know. I really hope they do it because it's one of my thing is like, you know what? Even if I die without seeing her, just take a Blu-ray or whatever the little thing that that generation do, just put it in my grave so maybe I can see it from there. And if it happens before I die, I don't know how many times I'm gonna see it. But yeah, the whole point of it is
like, bring like an oxygen tank with me if that's in the movie theater because I'm gonna be crying and like like I'm gonna need an inhaler or like a mask or something.
How do you fare in Pixar movies? I think like you're probably done in Pixar movies.
I don't really like Pixar movies though, so I'm like a weird because I don't have a sense of humor. That's the thing. We've covered this on the Omnipros guest appeared. I don't really laugh at things, and so movies that are like ostensibly funny, I'm kind of just like.
Okay, well, you should watch Coco and see if you can manage to not ugly cry. But anyway, like, and what I was trying to say is like, there's been before this movie came out, there's been a lot of chat about like, oh, you know what, this is like, oh, everyone's talking about this being a black superhero movie, but they had Blade. Yeah, you know what? Yeah, sorry, sir, but that happened 15 years ago and not all of it was good. And the thing is,
no denying that Blade opened the door to Marvel doing movies. I mean, they'd had 0 successes before Blade, and Blade showed them there was a way in, and that's powerful. But I mean, this Blade, you cannot compare Blade to Black Panther.
Right. And the thing is, again, here's the thing. Like, no one ever says that, oh my God, we have like, Captain America, let's not make Superman movie. No one ever says that. So you know what? Shut the F up and stop, stop talking like that. Like, I'm not telling you. I'm talking about people in general who speaks like that. So to me, like, it was a celebration in so many different ways. And I'm so happy to be alive in a time to having seen this movie, and I cannot wait. Like, I really, really hope that this opens the door for other different kinds of superhero, and especially like Kamala Khan and like other like minority groups to be seeing themselves, like to see themselves as like superheroes and to be represented in such a positive way.
Yeah, and I want to end on a note that somebody just mentioned in the chat to say Black Panther is more than just a black superhero. It's a cultural uplifting movie. And I think that that's the note to go out on. Like, we don't, superheroes don't have to be uplifting. You can tell sad stories and scary stories with superheroes. But if you're going to tell an uplifting superhero story, I think that it's going to be hard to hit all of the moments that hit in Black Panther. And you know what? And he's also a black superhero, but you don't have to say he's the best black superhero or the top selling black superhero, the #1 movie by a black director. He's just all of those things of movies and superheroes and directors, because that's the level of quality of this movie. And that's how stunning and audacious Ryan Coogler's vision was for the movie. And he absolutely succeeded.
And he didn't have to go through like, oh, he was imprisoned, or he had a drug problem, or he was a drug dealer.
Christopher Priest loved to make fun of in the comic books. Black Panther has never had that. But at the same time, I think it's also important to say that also doesn't take away the blackness. Like, he's the black superhero for people who want him to be the black superhero. And that's awesome. But I don't think as a cultural commentator, you can say, well, it's great that we finally got a black superhero as a white cultural commentator. Like, I don't know what the true meaning of that is. That doesn't have the same visceral impact to me that it would have to somebody else. He's both an important black superhero and an important superhero, and I think that the movie nailed it.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that now people are actually reading more about him and trying to find out more about him. There's someone that they actually like one post I saw, like they had no idea that all the technology that's in Marvel Universe comes from Wakanda. Like, Quinjet, everything comes from Wakanda, and they were so underappreciated. So I'm glad that that's gonna change.
Well, thank you so much. This was a marathon of talk. We've been talking for 2.5 hours right now. We're all out of water and maybe out of interesting thoughts. So, Freya, thank you so much. And we're going to be back one more time if you watch this live or if you're watching this in review. We have one more set of Black Panther comic books in our book club to talk about, and that is Ta-Nehisi Coates' 2016 run. And you can go back and hear us explain all about this Christopher Priest run. Here's the first 2 books of it, and a lot of the DNA of the movie are in these 2, Black Panther by Christopher Priest. Oh, that's upside down. No, wait. Yeah.
It was upside down.
Christopher Priest complete collection. So if you love the movie and you want to read comic books, maybe check those out online or get them physically, or just pick up that Ta-Nehisi Coates run. Freya, any final comments of farewell to our intrepid viewers?
No, I mean, go watch the movie, go watch it 1,000 times, make like, you know, and discuss it and then love it and all that jazz.
Yeah, I just think that it's a pure, awesome superhero moment, and it's definitely one that's you can go into in the movie theater and enjoy and share that experience and this cultural moment that's happening right now with seeing it. So thank you so much for watching another awesome Black Panther book parentheses movie club discussion from Crushing Comics. And we will see you again next week at 8 o'clock on Tuesday.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.